It's All Good with Sierra Scott. Brought to you by Central Security Group. Peace of mind you can afford.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of It's All Good. I'm Sierra Scott. Most Wichitans don't realize the power our city really has around the world, or the power it could have if we use our strengths to increase trade with other countries. Most of us who live here think of Wichita as a big, small town, but what you may not realize is that Wichita is poised to become a huge player in the world economy. After you see this story, I guarantee you'll never think of Wichita the same way again. We recently followed a Wichita delegation made up of the mayor, vice mayor, a state senator, and the president of a trade company during a 12-day trade mission to China. And we have an exclusive look into what they're discussing that could change our city and our lives forever. While politicians across America engage in China bashing, the truth of the matter is China is becoming an economic powerhouse that we just can't afford to ignore. China has the #2 strongest economy in the world and 1.3 billion people who want to buy American. As you're about to see, the Chinese definitely have the money to do it, and Wichita has the products they want to buy.
63,000 billionaires, not million, billion, that have their own money. That's cash that we can build those relationships, and that's cash that can be invested inside our communities.
That's according to a survey conducted by Deloitte.
And that's a reality of real cash that you can't ignore, and we're either going to play with them or they're going to play with somebody else, but the game will happen. If we're going to be competitive, we must start thinking globally. We must start thinking globally because these guys are going to make these investments, and they're going to make the investment either in our community or the one next to us or the next country next to us, but it's going to happen.
This is Wichita Mayor Carl Brewer's second trip to China since he's been in office.
Being the air capital of the world, we are a major player in the aviation industry, in the manufacturing industry.
And the mayor says we need to take advantage of that by exporting both our planes and our education programs. This delegation, made up of politicians and trade experts, spent 12 days using a combination of planes, bullet trains, and automobiles, or in this case, minibuses, traveling across China to do just that. Kansas Global President and CEO Karen Page has been in China more than a half dozen times. The first was in 1998. She says things have sure come a long way since then.
They are a global player. They're the #2 economy in the world. They are successful.
Karen's company is dedicated to making sure we don't miss out on trade opportunities.
What is the ultimate goal of this trip?
Sell Kansas products and services. It's really simple. I think people think it's quite complicated. It's not. We have some of the best products in the world, and in some categories, the best products in the world. China has a lot of cash, and they have a lot of people.
This is Senator Carolyn McGinn's third trip to China.
What changes have you seen in China over that time period?
Well, first of all, change happens quickly here. What I see is a country that's trying to compete in a global market.
This is Vice Mayor Janet Miller's first trip.
You know, honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. To start with, we've been very warmly welcomed in all the cities that we've traveled to. People are very gracious, they're very interested.
In the next few years, there's going to be a huge opportunity for Wichita's aviation industry to expand its reach and, in turn, expand its trade opportunities in China. Right now, Chinese airspace isn't open, at least not in the way we experience it. In China, the military controls the airspace, so it allows military aircraft and commercial jets easy access. However, it's very difficult for private planes to get permission to fly. But all that's expected to change in 2015.
Right now, every city in China is working on getting on the ground floor of expanding their aviation industry and purchasing and buying various different jets and planes to start preparing them for them to be able to commute back and forth.
The goal of the trip is to utilize the power of the mayor's office, as well combined with the state senator's power, because the Chinese view that very, very highly, and to open the doors or reopen doors so that the businesses can walk through and sell more product and more services. It's really that simple.
Simple, yet powerful at the same time.
It's not just about selling airplanes. Our vision actually is to brand Wichita, the air capital of the world, in China. Interestingly enough, most delegations that visit China don't just focus on one industry. For whatever reason, we've chosen to predominantly focus on general aviation and branding. So this is the first step in branding Wichita as the air capital of the world in China. Because I don't think most Wichitans understand why we're the air capital of the world, at least not in my conversations. We're the air capital of the world first because we build more airplanes than any other city in the world.
Not by a little bit, but by a lot. Over the years, more than 300,000 planes have been built in Wichita.
The other reason we're the air capital of the world is because we really are an aviation cluster.
That means we have both vertical integration and horizontal integration.
Vertical integration starts with research and development and innovation, continues through the application of that innovation to create the next great business jet, and then follows through to the training of the worker and the pilot, the maintenance and repair people and the pilot, to maintain those aircraft, to be able to keep those airplanes flying.
Keeping those planes flying is a big part of the plan. Coming up after the break, we'll tell you what Wichita has in the works to ensure that happens. Right before the break, we told you that Wichita has both vertical and horizontal integration. Horizontal integration is the hundreds of highly skilled aviation subcontractors, something China would love to have.
But they don't have the parts to make any aircraft or to repair aircraft. We have the aircraft parts manufacturers. We have the original equipment manufacturers like Cessna, Hawker Beach, and Learjet. We have the research and development. We have the training, and we have public-private partnerships. We have government support of the entire cluster.
By selling those talents,
the industry that we're strong in, that no one can compete with us in, that we continue to work on it and continue to support it and continue to make it stronger, because as we do that, we're taking care of families that are just right there. We're taking care of our next door neighbors and our relatives.
Well, when we went into the largest dip in our recession in the state of Kansas, 23% of our revenue that comes into the state of Kansas to pay for schools, social services, and other things that we do as far as essential services came from aviation. So when our aviation industry took a dive and a dip, it really hurt our revenues. It's very important that we continue to sell our product. When you export, you bring money into your state. It's not recycled, it's new money.
But it's not just planes we want to sell.
One of the things that was also discussed was the fact that we are the best place in the world to train pilots and maintenance workers, so that's something that Wichita wants to attract people to do as well from China. But then one of the criticisms is, well, we will train the pilots and the maintenance workers. They will then go back, and then they don't need us to train pilots and maintenance workers anymore, and we put ourselves out of business. How do you counteract that argument?
There's no need to counteract it. Because it's not just about selling at one time, it's about creating a relationship over time. So if we recruit the best and brightest Chinese students from each of the cities that we visited, and we bring them to Wichita, and we train them at National Center for Aviation Training, which is the best, at least in the country, in the United States, they come back, and they then have the skills to work on American aircraft, in particular Cessna aircraft, Bombardier Learjet aircraft, Hawker Beechcraft, because NCAT is set up that way. The other thing that happens is we train them to be pilots. Guess what kind of airplanes they pilot on when they learn how to pilot? Maybe a Cessna 172 or a Hawker Beechcraft model. And then they want to continue that relationship.
In other words, selling the training is just part of the strategy.
And when they share their knowledge on the platform, our platform, the American platform with American airplanes, or in particular Wichita airplanes, then they're going to want to continue that for their career and lifetime. They'll come back to China. Guess what airplanes they're going to talk about?
After a 14-hour flight from Chicago to Beijing, the delegation hit the ground running. The group spent 2.5 days in the nation's capital city, meeting with everyone from representatives from the U.S. Embassy to the city's vice mayor, who's responsible for business development.
We chose Beijing because they're the capital of China. They're also a good market for business jet usage. They also make decisions about airspace usage. When you take a trade mission to China, you really need to start at Beijing to give respect to the central government.
Meetings in Beijing started early and ran late. Most mornings we were out of the hotel before sunrise and rarely came home before 10 p.m. And the schedules here are merely a guideline. Although we had a very detailed itinerary, it changed almost hourly. Everyone here had to be highly adaptable.
On behalf of the entire Wichita Business Aviation Delegation, I'd like to say thank you today, and thank you for joining us. We had a luncheon this afternoon with many local businesses from the aviation industry. Today was a productive day, so we're looking forward to seeing what happens tomorrow.
Our next stop was in the same province where our sister city of Kaifeng is located.
Zhangzhou is the largest city in Henan province. They also have this huge desire and a plan to be the general aviation center of China.
To do that, they plan to focus on maintenance and repair and pilot training. Their goal is to become another Wichita.
They're rebuilding this entire area and making themselves an aviation area for an airport, very similar to what you see we have with Jabara Airport and Mid-Continent Airport.
While in Zhengzhou, the two sides signed an MOU, which stands for a Memorandum of Understanding. The signing was part of a very formal ceremony.
The agreement was between the city of Wichita and Zhejiang, where we will be actually a partner, and they're working on getting into the aviation industry and building a new runway and a training center.
It's really just about formalizing the handshake.
In other words, they aren't legally binding, but they're still very powerful.
As we sign off on this partnership and this agreement, that one, it will continue to enhance our city, but also to enhance your city.
What I like about it is that we have to put it in writing. That causes both parties to think about the relationship, to think about the mutual benefit that each want to obtain, and also what they can share with one another, so that each party can look at helping the other. Also, when you do a Chinese signing ceremony, it's a ritual. It's lovely, it's beautiful. Makes it even more serious. It takes you to a place that maybe you wouldn't go when you just shook hands and had a conversation, no matter how meaningful.
It also gives you a yardstick by which to measure your progress. One of the most important stops on the tour was in our sister city of Kaifeng.
Those relationships were made 30 some odd years ago.
We arrived just in time for their Chrysanthemum Festival, which is an event there that features national stars.
We had an opportunity to meet with the mayor. He expressed his interest in the things that we had done as far as educational and social exchanges, but his desire to get more involved in economic development between both cities.
This was Mayor Brewer's second visit to Kaifeng.
These guys are going to make these investments, and they're going to make the investment either in our community or the one next to us or the next country next to us, but it's going to happen.
And when that happens, the mayor says we need to be a part of it. Coming up after the break, we'll tell you why the next stop on the trip was so crucial. Day 7 brought the delegation to Xi'an, which is in north-central China. Representatives from Xi'an came to Wichita back in 2010. Right now, they really don't have a general aviation industry because, as we said earlier in the story, very few people fly private planes there right now. But they're gaining that knowledge.
We've come to realize now how on the verge China is of developing its general aviation.
If you look at this map, the trip not only covered the country geographically, it also covered the cities that had the most in common with us. Although aviation was the main topic of discussion, it definitely wasn't the only one. The last stop was in Wuxi, which is our eco partner. The discussion there focused more on water and air quality. There are two reasons eco-partnerships are extremely important to Wichita. One, it's a partnership created at the federal level between the United States government and the Chinese government.
The second reason it's important is it's one of only 15 in the world.
And Wichita was one of the original 7. As China works hard at trying to compete on an international stage, they're beginning to have more water-related issues too.
The concern continues to increase as they develop. There's issues such as water quality issues. They've had for years, but when you start building factories, if you don't locate them in the right place, you're going to have water quality issues.
Which is something Wichita is all too familiar with. Just a few years back, we had to clean up the Arkansas River, and we also had to clean up groundwater contamination in Old Town. The city worked with businesses and developers to come up with a solution.
Now we've turned it into this wonderful Bricktown and entertainment center. We've had other issues, problems of pollution, and we've turned those into positive things.
Access to education was also discussed. The mayor would like to expand exchange programs to include more than just college students.
We'll continue working on the cultural because it's very important. We have individuals in our community that have not been outside their community. What's wrong with in high school, them going to another country and getting that experience, and from an educational, cultural, and economic experience.
Having Chinese exchange students here in America also boosts our economy.
It's a service export. So when a Chinese student comes to Wichita, Kansas, and studies at Wichita State University or Friends University or whatever university it is, it's actually an export because we're getting dollars from a foreign country to pay for that tuition.
One of our tourist attractions will also benefit from the visit. Botanica plans to open a Chinese garden, and a mayor there offered to donate real Chinese artifacts to make sure our garden is truly authentic.
We're going to help invest in this Chinese garden because as if it's their garden, and so they have a certain amount of pride and ownership in it.
This is a rendering of the project expected to be completed in the fall of 2014. Some people have criticized the mayor for taking trips like this one and say he should just conduct business over the phone.
Every culture depends somewhat on relationship building, but I think with the Chinese culture, relationship is above everything, and you don't build that relationship in one visit or 2 visits. So even in America, but even more so in China, there is real significance placed on the relationship building, and that happens first. There begins a formal meeting, but then it's always followed by food, and I think that's common in many cultures.
In China, it's in other countries too. That face-to-face and where they get that opportunity to build that relationship and to get to know you personally, that's when they build that confidence and they say, I'm interested in doing business. They want to know you personally as opposed to what they see on paper.
Like in America, many of the most important exchanges actually happened over meals like this one. When it comes to relationships, Karen says Wichita does have an important advantage.
Kansas is really in a unique position. We were the, I believe, 3rd state in the nation to form a relationship with a province, which is the equivalent of a state in China. We have a sister state relationship with Henan province, which is in the center of China, like Kansas is in the center of the United States. And that relationship is over 30 years old, which is nothing in the history of China, but in regard to international relations with the United States, it's a long time. The Chinese do respect that, they do acknowledge that.
Mayor, I'd like to give this on behalf of Kansas. Pictures. This is what you, when you come to Kansas, this is what you will see.
A few people have criticized the cost of taking trips like this one, but this trip didn't cost the city much. A federal grant through the Eco Partnership paid $40,000 to $50,000 of the cost. To put this into perspective, if one Chinese student comes to NCAT to train or learn maintenance and repair, Wichita will have made much more than that.
And I think what really people are concerned about is that it's a waste of money, that it's not being used wisely, that we're just over here having a good old time.
Oh, no. I can promise that's not the case.
I promise that if I were going to have a good old time, I'd just be at home.
You start talking about how much you actually spend, then you start thinking about the return on investment.
Which Karen Page says can be hard to measure sometimes. The catch is, you don't always see an immediate return.
I hope that what we've done on this trip is that we might see something in 12 months. What if we're successful in branding Wichita as the air capital of the world in China? And that helped Cessna, Hawker Beach, Spirit, Bombardier Learjet sell one more jet worth millions of dollars.
Aside from the cost, there are some people who think we should never do business with China. Coming up after the break, we'll hear what those on the trip think about that. Before the break, we told you there's a group of people out there who think we should never do business with China. In fact, while we were there, this huge article appeared on the front page of the Chinese newspaper.
One of the things that has become very popular is China bashing. And a lot of people think that we should not do business with China. Why do you think we should?
You know, China bashing is popular every 4 years, and it seems to play on a fear. It's kind of a fear-mongering. The flip side of it is when there are economic development opportunities that can help Wichita prosper and Wichitans prosper, why would we not seek those even beyond our boundaries? You know, why only be an importer of Chinese goods and products? Why not sell to the Chinese? And that's what we're looking at doing, is helping the Wichita economy through trade and export of our expertise. We're the air capital of the world. Why wouldn't we want to capitalize on that around the world? And I think this is the opportunity for us to do that.
We export a lot of things, and for us to shut down a country that's such a player in our national economy, I think would only hurt us. And all it would do is open the door for other countries to walk in and benefit from that growing economy.
If we don't sell the planes, some other country is going to sell them the planes, and we're going to have those thousands and thousands of employees that will be unemployed.
On the 11th day, the trip came to an end in Shanghai, where the mayor and his delegation spent time debriefing and discussing what they learned.
We're on the right track, and we'll see what happens.
Do you guys do anything?
This schedule has been incredibly grueling. I'm amazed, and I have so much respect for all of you that have just carried the torch through this entire time that we've been here. How do you feel the success of the mission has been?
I believe that the mission has been very successful.
They're all wanting to, in some way, explore trade opportunities with us, and honestly now they seem even to be getting a little competitive among themselves about looking for opportunities. And I came away feeling even more proud about Wichita and our standing in the world.
We can look at China as being our competition, or we can look at China as being our partner. If you plan on going to the Olympics, you got to play in the Olympics, and you have to prepare for the Olympics. It's obvious 2015 is, for aviation industry, is the Olympics. And yes, the city of Wichita, the state of Kansas will be there.
In March of 2013, China actually had a trade deficit, which means it imported more than it exported, something that rarely happens. I'm Sierra Scott. Thank you for watching this special edition of It's All Good.
It's All Good with Sierra Scott. Brought to you by Central Security Group. Peace of mind you can afford.